Every day in the valley, someone will call the police reporting seeing a UFO, strange lights in the sky moving in strange ways. But it is very rare for thousands of people to call and report seeing the same lights in the same spot at the same time. It happened last night, and eyewitnesses who saw it say it's like nothing they've ever seen before.
You are now somewhere in the skies with your host, Ryan Sprague.
Welcome to a very special episode of Somewhere in the Skies. Well, today's guest is of no surprise. You did see his image in the featured image, and he's right here with me today. We're going to be talking all about the Phoenix Lights incident. Jason has an even closer connection to the Phoenix Lights. He was there when it happened, and he saw it. So, Jason, welcome back to Somewhere in the Skies, buddy.
Oh, Ryan, it is so fantastic to see your face, my friend. I miss you, and I am so excited to be here today.
So, yeah, we're going to be talking all about the Phoenix Lights. I'm sure a lot of our listeners and viewers are very familiar with this case. But for any of our listeners and viewers who are new to the UFO world, we know that our community has probably quadrupled in the past few years, and people are just getting into this topic and learning about the history of it. You know, we got the Roswells and the Socorros and the Rendleshams and stuff like that, but Phoenix Lights is up there, really high up there in terms of legitimacy, credibility, theories on what it could have been. But yeah, before we get to your personal connection, my man, could you tell us a little about this event? Maybe kind of the broad sweeping overview of what the Phoenix Lights was, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, I would love to. As you already said, I mean, for anybody who's dipped their toe into the UFO field or UFO research, has most likely come across the Phoenix Lights. But this is essentially the most famous mass UFO sighting when you look into UFOs. This occurred in March of 1997 in Phoenix, Arizona, as the name implies, but it certainly affected more people and was seen in more places than just Phoenix, Arizona. It prompted reports all the way up top of the state, even into Nevada, coming down through the state and even into Mexico. So what happened on March 13th? This was at night. This was between, witness reports vary, but between 7:30 and 10:30 p.m. at night. Mm-hmm. And thousands of people across the state of Arizona reported seeing various things, which is not uncommon with UFO sightings. Everybody interprets things different ways. Everybody has different vantage points and things like that. But it's most commonly accepted that perhaps multiple events occurred that night, multiple different objects in the sky. People saw different things. The first one being what some describe as a mile-wide craft, some solid craft consisting of a series of lights. And the number of those lights varies depending on who you talk to, but 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all sorts of different configurations of lights, but mostly in sort of a V formation, traversing the entire state. A second event, like people call it, occurred in the West Valley of Phoenix, and it was a series of lights, sort of in a boomerang pattern, that just sort of hung in the air for an extended period of time, for hours even, some report. But, as I said, there were multiple things reported that night. Everybody's description doesn't line up, which again is common with UFOs. A lot of different stories, but ultimately the story here is they were unknown lights that were seen by thousands of people in Phoenix. These all were reported, it was investigated, tried to be investigated by government officials, and ultimately we still don't know what the Phoenix Lights were.
Right. And we'll get to that investigation, quote unquote, in a little bit. We've got some really cool archival footage to show you guys of the lights, of news footage that came out around the time that the event happened. So we're swinging back into the 90s today. This is going to be fun to to see some of the coverage of this back then. But let's go ahead, Jason. First, I'm going to show one of the videos of the Phoenix Lights that was caught by one of these witnesses, and that's by a gentleman named Tom King, who I actually got to meet when I was out in Phoenix investigating this case, which is another tease of something we're going to talk about a little bit later too. And yeah, Tom was one of those individuals who was able to catch these things on camera. So let me pull that up, and we're going to take a quick look at his video.
Why not?
Yeah,
They
four.
keep
I said
coming.
four.
Wait, whoa, look at them.
I got that one on video.
There's 4 of them. Look at there's 3 of them all together.
I got the third one popping.
Over to your left. There's one behind the chimney. One just flared up.
I got 4 of them. Major sighting here.
No, there's 5.
Oh!
Another one just showed up. They're multiplying.
Whoa!
Maybe somebody's setting up lights.
Did you see that?
No, those are in the sky.
There's one underneath the house too.
There's one behind the chimney.
Look it, come
We need to
up
go to
here.
Pecos.
I can't see how this works. How does this
Holy
work?
Oh, you got it too
shit.
hot. Have you seen that
Allison,
before?
look at my bed.
No.
That's weird.
They're lined up in a pattern, man. There's geometry behind this.
All right. So again, you can obviously hear the excitement in their voices, which I always love. Like, especially when we have these new UFO videos with like even the people in the Navy being like, "What is going on here?"
Yeah.
I would assume, that was Tom in the background talking, and it was clear that it was unnerving for everyone there. I mean, no matter what it was, everyone was freaking out. And like you mentioned, Jason, they started calling local law enforcement or, the airport. A lot of people believe that these were coming from either the airport, Sky Harbor, or the military bases nearby, which, again, very contentious. We'll get to kind of the military aspect of all this too. But yeah. What did you think of Tom's video there? That's definitely one of the most famous ones, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. That's one that we see a lot of news reports and stories talking about the Phoenix Lights. And like you said, it captures the excitement of observing something that hasn't been seen before. These people clearly had not seen that kind of display in the sky before, so it's very exciting and very confusing too. And that confusion and excitement is what prompted so many people to contact the media, the airports, Luke Air Force Base, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, all these different sources trying to get answers. And when you see a video like that, just without context, I as a UFO researcher and investigator would look at that and think, yes, this looks very much like military flares because you see a straight line of light, you see them popping on and off, and that's usually a good indicator of military flares, and that's certainly one of the prominent explanations that was eventually offered by the military to explain this.
You're right. And well, let's sort of start with that. The people started reporting this to New Fork, I believe, immediately as it was happening, and the airports. And correct me if I'm wrong, but around this time, when the calls first started coming in, they weren't taking responsibility, right? The military and whatnot, weren't they saying like, yeah, we got nothing up there? Am I correct in that?
Correct. Yeah, the military. Well, as far as their willingness to provide any answers, they kind of stonewalled for quite a while. It wasn't until months later, even half a year later, that they offered an explanation.
Okay, yeah. And again, this is where this is going to get messy and muddy, guys. So bear with us as we kind of stumble through the Phoenix Lights, because there's kind of 2 incidents, and that's a really interesting aspect of this whole thing. Is are we dealing with some sort of cover up or whatnot? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Jason, let's talk about your personal involvement with this case. You were living in Phoenix at the time, and you were a part of this. And again, you now have the bragging rights to say you were part of one of the most famous UFO cases of all time. So yeah, give it to us, man. What did you see? Set this up for us, if you don't mind. Tell us the story of your sighting.
Sure. So this is the quick overview. So I was 17 at the time. I was living in Phoenix's Far West Valley on the other side of the Estrella Mountains. And if you've read about this case, you're familiar with the Estrella Mountains, and it's with the flare theory, it's commonly brought up that the flares disappeared behind the mountains. It sort of winked out, and that's because they were descending like military flares do. I was on the other side of the Estrella Mountains, and what I observed, and again, I can't speak for what other people saw. I can only speak to what I saw. Mm-hmm. And what I saw did not descend at all. and I was quite familiar with military flares. I'll talk about that in a minute. But what I saw was sometime during the night, I have no idea when this was because it was so long ago, so I'm not going to pretend to. I'm going to guess it was around 9 o'clock at night. I saw a series of lights, and I can't remember exactly how many lights, but somewhere between 7 and 9 lights in either a sweeping arc or a triangle formation in the sky, almost directly over my head. Just I could go out into our yard, stand, look up, and see this series of lights just suspended in the air. No movement, no sound, no apparent change at all in brightness, intensity. There was no flickering, nothing like that. These lights were just stationary lights hanging in the sky. It was crazy. And they had a slight similarity in appearance to military flares. And I know that because I grew up, again, way out in the middle of nowhere. And to the southwest of me is the Barry Goldwater test range, where the military frequently drops these flares in their training exercises. What these flares do is they illuminate the ground for the A-10s flying. It illuminates these ground targets so they can do night training. Okay. And these high-intensity flares, when they drop, I've seen them so many times, so it's hard for me to describe what they look like because I can pretty much tell just by looking at something that it is a military flare. But these high-intensity flares that were used really only have a burn time of about 5 minutes. They're suspended by these parachutes. They do kind of drift and burn while the magnesium or whatever they're composed of is burning. And they kind of drift down. You'll see a smoke trail. You'll see, like with Chinese lanterns, you see a pulsing of the light because there is a fuel cell, something burning there that creates this burning effect, this strobing effect. But what I saw was in the sky for well more than 5 minutes. And it wasn't that I went away and maybe they dropped more flares in the same spot, so I was confused. I watched these things for a good solid 30 minutes to know that they were there for a long period of time. They weren't flares. They weren't, at least no flares that we know of. I mean, these were completely stationary. They didn't wink out. They didn't descend at all. They were in the sky for such a long period of time. And again, these were special high-intensity flares that were being used, but they only have a burn time of approximately 5 minutes. So for me, the flare idea went out the window pretty quickly. It's not something that I seriously considered at the time. And since then, I did serve as a professional full-time UFO investigator and journalist. And during my time being a professional UFO investigator, I probably examined hundreds of UFO photos and videos every single year during my 7-year span. And, I got pretty good at being able to identify flares and things like that. And, to this day, I haven't been able to satisfactorily come up in my mind with an explanation for what I saw because it doesn't align with flares. It doesn't align with other things. And the flare theory is also problematic for me because, well, we can get into the government's explanation later and we can go deeper into that. But that's essentially what I saw, just a series of lights suspended in the sky, no sound, no motion, no apparent change at all. And they were there probably for 45 minutes. I did leave at one point, but when I came back, they were gone 45 minutes later. And then I remember seeing them on the news that night. So.
Wow. So a couple questions, follow-up questions for you. Was there anyone else there when you saw this? And did it ever, cross your mind to try to record this thing? Again, these are the two questions every UFO witness gets. Were you alone when this happened? And why didn't you get that? Now, today we live the luxury of having, a camera with us 24/7. And a lot of people do ask that question, that if we have this technology right now, why aren't more people catching these things on film? But again, this is back in 97. Other people there, and did it ever cross your mind to try to record this?
So my family was certainly home. I believe they were just inside watching TV. And I seem to recall, mentioning it to them because they kept seeing me run outside and look at them. But, to them, it was just, oh, there are lights in the sky. That's cool. And, I don't think they ever paid any attention to it or thought that it was something anomalous that they should come and experience as well. So no, I mean, for me, it also wasn't like this urgency thing or something that I was like, oh my God, we're being attacked by aliens. It, to me, was just more of intrigue. You know, it was something that I'd never seen before. I thought it was extremely fascinating, and my mind couldn't come up with a logical explanation for what I was seeing. And to your second question, you bet I tried to record it. I mean, you're right, it was 97, and my family was probably the only family I knew of at the time, you know, and our friends that had a video camera. And this was yeah, good old video cameras. But yeah, I did actually take the video camera out and try to record these lights. So I did, and I don't remember how long I filmed them or how good the footage was. But yeah, as I always say, that footage is lost, and I've never been able to discover it, not because Men in Black stole it, but because my parents probably recorded over the footage by, you know, recording one of my brother's soccer games or something. So, you know, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent pouring through boring family home videos, you know, looking through the tapes, hoping that there's like a piece of footage there, you know, somewhere that I haven't seen yet. But yeah, I did. I definitely got it on camera. I just have never been able to find that footage.
Wow, good for you, man. Well, yeah, well, hey, maybe it's still
Well,
buried
good for
somewhere
me.
deep
It
in your
tortures me to this
parents'
day
attic.
that I don't have it.
I know, but at least you tried. That was pretty. So you were pretty young when that happened. Did you have an interest in UFOs prior to seeing this, or was this kind of your first initiation into this topic?
It was certainly my first kind of notable UFO sighting. I'd spent a lot of time in the desert. Well, I lived in the desert, in the middle of the desert, middle of nowhere. So the only thing for me to do on weekends with my friends was go camping. So we spent a lot of time camping, out looking at the stars, and you know, I would see interesting things, as you do if you just stare at the sky. But my interest was always there in space, in astrobiology, in just the universe in general, and the mysteries that come with that. So, you know, always a big believer in extraterrestrial life, thought that the universe is teeming with life. And, you know, I always had that interest. And certainly I grew up on sci-fi, a big Star Trek, Star Wars fan. Those were the shows that I would watch. So I had the interest, but the sighting itself was the first major UFO sighting that I'd personally been involved with. And at the time, it didn't really affect me that much. Again, beside just the intrigue that I had. You know, I'd say UFO sightings I've had since then have had more of a, you know, wow factor on me. But yeah, I mean, it didn't start my UFO career, but it certainly kind of got me a little more excited about it.
Well, let's move on with the timeline of the event. Now, once all these calls started coming in and the news started covering it, there was no, you know, putting the lid back on this thing. It was out there. Hundreds and hundreds of people, like you mentioned, saw it. And people were looking to the government to start to, you know, deal with this. Local government, we're talking the governor of Phoenix at the time, Fife Simonton. And what ended up happening, and we're going to show the video. I know you've seen it a million times, Jason, but for a lot of people who aren't aware, the governor did talk about what had happened and wanted to touch on that. Yes, we're investigating it, and we think we found the culprit to the Phoenix Lights. So let's go ahead and play the infamous video of Fife Simonton and the press conference.
It a serious offense for anyone, human, space alien, or otherwise, to engage in mysterious activity in our nighttime skies. That is why I will personally ask that the perpetrator be prosecuted to the fullest for the havoc wrought on our entire community. And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please. It's, you know. Now, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
There it is, Jason. There it is, the infamous press conference. So
Yeah.
did you happen to see this back in the day when it actually aired live?
I do remember seeing it, yeah. And we do have a special guest joining us today.
Oh my, is that the actual mask? What Explain this to me. Explain.
It's the same one that was worn, not the actual one, but yes, the same costume that Fife Symington's chief of staff wore. Yeah, and that is courtesy of our good friend and fellow Rogue Planeteer Maureen Ellsbury. She got that many years ago, and she gifted it to me when she moved back to Seattle. But yeah, that's the actual one, and it sat in a storage locker. So Arizona heat and everything, it's, you know, being this rubber mask, it's very much dried out and very crumbly. So I wouldn't attempt to put it on right now. But.
Yeah, I don't blame you. We won't make you do that.
So yeah, with Symington, and at that time, the Phoenix Lights wasn't that big of a deal. It was locally, there was a lot of buzz, a lot of intrigue, and people asking questions and wanting answers. But remember, this happened in March, and it wasn't until June of that same year, 97, that it started getting national press. The USA Today had a front page story about the Phoenix Lights. And so it was in June when Symington held that press conference.
Okay. Yeah, I remember hearing about the USA Today headline. And that's, again, like you said, that's when it went worldwide and everyone started talking about it. And then I think the pressure started coming on to kind of the people in Phoenix to explain this, for the military to explain this. Because again, these things were seen over the major airports. They were seen over the city. This could be a potential threat. We have to keep that in mind, right?
A lot of that credit, if not most of that credit, goes to Frances Barwood, who was a Phoenix City councilwoman at the time. And she's the one who, during a council meeting, suggested that they should look into this, because a lot of constituents were calling in and saying, hey, what's going on here? Is there any answers to explain this? So she brought it up during a council meeting, and she was met with ridicule and scorn. And she even says that a city manager came up to her after and said, you shouldn't have said that. And you know, she took it seriously, and she fielded phone calls from thousands of witnesses. You know, she took it very seriously and wanted to help people find answers. But her colleagues, you know, and people from the governor's office, they kind of harassed her at work. You know, they would hang little goofy, funny alien jokes, you know, in her office and on her photo in the hall, and, you know, tell people that if they want to talk to her, they need to speak into the tinfoil and things like that. I mean, she was just made fun of because she was looking into this matter seriously. And, you know, that around that time too was also Fife Symington seemingly joking about it as well. So a lot of that ridicule played into, you know, played as obstacles for anybody trying to get serious investigation into this.
Right. And, you know, serious is another way to look at it, because a lot of the witnesses, they didn't think it was funny that Fife Symington did this joke press conference, which he called kind of a prank on the media, because the media was pushing for answers. So he gave them his answers, and the calls started flooding in to Frances Barwood. Again, kind of the unsung hero, I think, in the entire event that occurred, and kind of the, you know, the hits she took. I actually have some archival footage from a news segment that took place locally in Phoenix of Frances talking about getting these calls and how she perceived what the governor had done at the time. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Bear with me, guys, here. Make sure I have the right one. Yeah, let's hear from Frances Barwood.
Ms. Barwood asked for a similar investigation not long ago. We have her on the telephone now. Ms. Barwood, what's your reaction at this point?
Well, I've gotten many phone calls from people that are very upset that this is a joke, and I'm wondering, you know, now with the confusion, is he really going to do an investigation, or was the entire thing a joke?
Well, we just heard from his chief of staff that they have, in fact, asked for an investigation. We'll see if that turns out to be a joke as well. But the investigation you called for never panned out. You got roundly criticized for that as well.
Right, and that was kind of surprising because, you know, all I did was ask for us to look into what so many people saw and to find out if it was military, and shame on them for doing it, 2, if it was a hoax, and how did they do it, and 3, if it was something else, but at the very least look into it and see what it was.
Do you at all feel like the governor and his office were making fun of you?
I would hope that, you know, he hasn't gone to that level. I get an awful lot of that from the mayor himself, so I doubt that that's his type of sense of humor. I'm hoping what he's done is made, his little joke for the summer, and that he will do a serious investigation, because to thousands of people, this is a very serious thing, and they're very, very concerned, that nobody wants to even look into it.
City Councilwoman Frances Barwood, what are callers telling you?
Well, a lot of things. They said, what's going on? He goes into the court and he comes out and he changes his mind, and, just a whole bunch of stuff. But everyone that's called me is very angry.
Again, this local politics drama is what I live for, especially when it comes to a UFO event. So, yeah,
well,
man,
you want a little more
pissed.
political drama with that. During that interview or during the press conference, I think that was during the time when Symington was actually being indicted for multiple counts of fraud. So
right. Yep, there's that too. So, didn't he? No, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he save a president's life or something like that? That's how he got pardoned.
He saved Bill Clinton's life, apparently. Yeah. So what happened was he was convicted of multiple counts of bank fraud or something, and that was eventually overturned. But before the feds could retry or bring the charges again, Bill Clinton pardoned him, and apparently, when they were kids, Symington saved Clinton from a riptide, from drowning or something. Somewhere
there
on the
you
East
go,
Coast.
guys.
Yeah.
You never know when something will come back to either bite you in the ass or help you out. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind for future politics.
But I do think Symington gets a bad rap, and we'll talk about that. But for people who just casually look into this case and they see that press conference, all of a sudden Symington is vilified and he's the bad guy in this whole thing, when actually I think he comes out looking pretty good.
Right. He does have a redemption story in all this. Well, let's hop into that. So, Fife Symington clearly didn't take this too seriously. He did want to do this press conference to kind of calm people down and hopefully just put it to rest. Like, it was clearly something prosaic. We might not know exactly what it is, but there is an explanation. We're fine. Moving on. But the people of Phoenix were not ready to move on. They wanted answers, because the thing with this is people had so many varying experiences with it. Some saw it really up close, some far away. Some said that they had this instant amnesia when the event happened. I've explored cases of this as well, where people saw UFOs and immediately forgot about it, within seconds, almost like the Men in Black syndrome, or their emotions were manipulated, or something like that occurred. And there are people with the Phoenix Lights who have said that happened. So clearly that wasn't just a balloon or a flare that did that to them. Is it something within them, their physiology, their mental state during the event, adrenaline, emotions? I don't know. But people were pissed about this press conference. Frances Barwood eventually, I believe, was voted out because of the stigma behind her defending this thing and keeping it going. And again, unsung hero of all this. But let's get to it. Fife Symington, his redemption.
And before that, for anyone who wants to hear more from Frances Barwood, we did have her as a guest at the International UFO Congress. I forget what year that was, but there is recording of her presentation from that event. So if you want to hear all about her story and everything she went through during that incident, you can find that presentation from the International UFO Congress.
Yeah, I believe it was 2013. I was researching it last night.
Sounds right.
And it's pretty emotional. Yeah, she goes through her whole journey with all of this. And again, kind of took the hits for everybody with it, unfortunately. But okay, Fife Symington. Redemption story. Let's play this clip from John Hook, a local news anchor, very famous in Phoenix. I had the pleasure of doing an interview with him and Jeremy Corbell, which people still bring up to this day. I looked so young and skinny.
Hey, I'm so glad you were there to do that. you saved us all by doing that interview.
Guard.
Yeah.
It was super fun. So Fife Symington did this really in-depth interview with John Hook, and I'm going to play a little bit of that now and get his redemption story. So he would eventually come forward and admit that he also was a witness to this. Check this out, guys.
March 13th, 1997. This event called Lights Over Phoenix. What did you see?
Well, I saw a huge craft just kind of come right over Squaw Peak. That was, it was just breathtaking. And I'm not sure about the date. You've got a better memory
March
for the
13th.
dates than I do. Yeah.
But there was no, like the Clinton day, no.
No. No, I was on a strict diet. No, I'm serious. I'm serious now. That unquestionably it was a UFO, which means unidentified flying object.
Right. Doesn't mean we're being visited.
Well, it's nothing like anything I've ever seen.
And you're an Air Force guy.
Yeah, and a pilot. Got a lot of hours flying, so it was pretty breathtaking.
Did it frighten you?
No, I think I was kind of in awe, really.
How big?
Bigger than anything I've ever seen in the sky.
Like an aircraft carrier in the sky?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and it was hard to define because of the light, in terms of the size. But it was absolutely silent and had sort of eerie embedded lights, and so that's what I saw. And I wasn't expecting to see anything because I was looking out over at Luke,
right.
to the west, and then all of a sudden these people in the park area just on the west side of 51, there were a bunch of people there. Everybody said, "Oh, look at that!" And we turned around, and this thing was coming from the northwest, traveling to the southeast. There have been so many different sort of sightings and inexplicable phenomena that, but the disparity in terms of technological progress would be so vast that we would be, I think, of sort of no consequence to whoever is visiting us, because the technology to get here would be just beyond anything we could imagine.
Did it hover?
No, it was just going in a straight line.
Slow pace?
Yeah, slow pace, yeah. And then, there were all the sightings. Flares. There were the sightings of the America West plane coming into Sky Harbor, said he could have landed on it.
It was enormous.
Yeah.
Like an aircraft carrier in the sky? Is that about as close as you could?
I think that's a fair description,
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
There we go. There's Mr. Fife Symington's redemption story. So what did you think, Jason, when you heard that, after making fun of this and everything, he now admitted to being a part of it? But not only that, like believing this was not of earthly explanation in his opinion. Yeah, what do you make of all that?
Yeah, that was amazing when he actually started talking about it and we learned the backstory and the things that were going on behind the scenes. Like I said, the knee-jerk reaction for UFO researchers, seeing the press conference is thinking that Symington was making a joke of it and he didn't take it seriously and all that. But in fact, we found out that he was actively trying to get answers. He was pressing the Air Force bases and he was getting stonewalled. They weren't giving him any answers and he was getting frustrated by that. Here he is, the governor of the state, unable to get answers from the military bases within the state. It was very frustrating for him. And as he said, he was a captain in the Air Force, a pilot. And he said that he'd never seen anything like that before. And he's also, in other views, said that he's convinced that what he saw was not from this world. James Fox has interviewed him in his documentaries. In 2007, Symington moderated the National Press Club event that Leslie Kean and James Fox put together. So we spoke about it there too. Symington's testimony, as a witness to the Phoenix Lights has been hugely powerful and just illustrates the problems of trying to get answers when it comes to UFOs and the difficulty getting government bodies to talk to each other and share information.
Right, exactly. And, I know you've written about the Phoenix Lights a lot back in the day when you were working with Open Minds. And you've done a lot of great work on this case overall. And when it comes to covering this case as a journalist, you also have to cover the skeptical side of all this, the theories, the explanations of what the Phoenix Lights could have been. So I guess let's kind of fast forward a little bit to what some of those theories that have been posed, Jason, about what the Phoenix Lights were, what the military came forward and said was going on. Could you maybe run us through some of those theories on exactly what this event could have been? These videos that were caught later in the night, I believe, around 10-ish, 10:30, even though people started reporting these V-shaped craft around 8 o'clock, 8:30. What are some of those theories posed on what the Phoenix Lights were?
Well, certainly we have, just regular planes flying in formation. Being a night sky, it's hard to tell when things are separate individual sources of light or if they're connected to one larger craft. And even the accounts, many of the accounts that talk about a singular large craft, there's not a lot of ability to determine detail other than saying, well, it kind of blocked out the stars or whatever. And many of them even talk about the light's changing position, or the triangle shape with a light in front of it and a light trailing it. A lot of different stories there that, maybe could be explained by separate craft. I don't know. But flares obviously is the one that comes to mind the most because the appearance is very close to flares. And it does seem from some of the videos that have been popularized that there were flares being dropped. And that's what the military says. There were exercises taking place that night. And I certainly don't discount that. I think certainly that could be the case. And I know Dr. Lynn Kitai, one of the probably the leading experts on the Phoenix Lights, she's devoted a lot of her life to being the go-to person for that. Love Lynn, and she does a great job. But something that she says is, and a lot of people repeat, is that, as I mentioned with my personal sighting, it's not uncommon to see flare drops in this area. And Dr. Kitai uses that as a basis to say, obviously people in Phoenix have seen this before. They would know what flares look like. And that's a big jump because most people haven't seen military flares drop. Even in Phoenix, where you can see it quite frequently, the 5th largest city in the country, 4.5 million people or something, still not everybody's going to be looking in the same spot in the sky at the same time. Not everybody's going to have the same vantage points. So it's not something that people immediately identify. So it's always possible that many people saw flares, and for the first time, as we just saw in San Diego, right? There was a big hullabaloo in San Diego this year with clear military flares dropped over a military testing range, pretty clear cut. But with the Phoenix Lights, the flare theory, was heavily investigated. And again, with the military not offering explanation, until half a year later, what they eventually settled on for their explanation was that these were military flares, and they were dropped by a group that a squadron that flew out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, which is 2 hours south of Phoenix, and they were a part of what they call Project Snowbird, which is an arrangement they work out with squadrons from other states where, in March, they're usually dealing with snow and bad weather. They come to Arizona for their training because we don't have those issues. We just have beautiful weather all the time. So that's what they identified. They identified a squadron from the Maryland Air National Guard that was in Davis-Monthan Air Force Base doing their training at the Barry Goldwater Test Range. And I believe they claimed it was their last day of doing the exercises. And before they returned to base, they jettisoned all their remaining flares and went back to Tucson. There are a lot of problems with that. Number one being the time that they propose this happens. It doesn't line up with witness accounts. Number two, what I already mentioned about the flares and their 5-minute burn times, that clearly wasn't seen in many of the sightings. You also have the fact that, from what I understand, and again, I'm not in the military, I'm not a pilot who does this type of stuff, but from what I understand, it's not uncommon to jettison the remaining flares before returning to base. I think that's ridiculous because these flares are actually thousands of dollars with military spending, and government spending that apparently is not an issue, but I would think they would want to keep those unless they can't be reused once they're loaded for some reason. But also, where these things were seen over a metropolitan area, major metropolitan area, and Phoenix, Arizona, March, hate to tell you, but we've always been in a ginormous drought. Everything is dry, and the state would catch on fire if you're just dropping these flares, randomly over wherever you want, because I'm dumping and going back to base. It's horribly irresponsible, and Francis Barwood even touched on that. It's sloppy, it's dangerous, and somebody should be held accountable for that. But even the pilots who participated in that training, that testing from the Maryland Air National Guard, didn't come forward for a long time, and people saw that as a red flag. However, as I pointed out, this really wasn't a national story. It gained some momentum in June, and that's when, some calls were made. That's when people started hearing about it. But, with all of the hype that was generated, they certainly didn't think, oh, that could have been us. It wasn't something they really talked about or considered, thinking maybe we should come forward and admit this. So, there are lots of excuses, lots of long drawn out stories. But ultimately, the biggest, being Symington getting stonewalled, not being able to find answers, Francis Barwood not being able to get answers, and the general public being ultimately delivered an answer that doesn't line up with the facts.
Welcome to ufology 101. Yeah. Never seems to line up. Well, one of the points you bring up, Jason, is very important, and that's timing. Now, again, the flares wouldn't last that long. They would burn if they hit the ground. Very irresponsible. There's so many factors that just don't line up with that explanation, and also the fact that people were seeing a solid craft, as they say, around 8:30. Now, again, that's open for speculation as well. Was it one solid craft? Was it 5 airplanes in a V formation? We don't know. Let's I guess backtrack just a bit. Now, a few years ago, and a lot of people put this in the chat already, talk about Kurt Russell. He does have a connection to the Phoenix Lights. Let's go ahead and play the video. This came from a press junket he was doing with Chris Pratt for, I believe it was Guardians of the Galaxy 2, I think, that Kurt Russell was in. And the topic of the Phoenix Lights came up by the host, and then Kurt Russell just let it rip. So let's go ahead and play that for the audience right now.
Place in Arizona. An unidentified pilot, according to the press cuttings, flying near an airport in Arizona with his son when he spotted 6 lights in the night sky. So he called from the airplane to air traffic control to say, I'm seeing these lights here. I wasn't expecting any other planes. They're none supposed to be on my landing path. Can you tell me what's going on? They said there are no other planes. He said, I'm seeing 6 bright lights coming towards me. Mystery unresolved.
Except, tail number for that plane was Bonanza 2 Tango Sierra, and I was the pilot. No way. Oliver and I.
Doesn't say that in the briefing.
Oliver and I.
I should have read to the end.
Oliver and I were flying in. I was flying him to go see his girlfriend, and we were on approach, and I saw 6 lights over the airport in absolute uniform in a V shape, and Oliver said to me, I was just looking at him, and I was coming in. We're maybe a half a mile out, and Oliver said, "Pa, what are those lights?" And I then it kind of like came out of my reverie, and I said, "I don't know what they are." I said, he said, "Are we okay here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna call him," and I reported it. And they said, "We're not painting anything. We don't show anything." I said, "Well, okay, I'm going to declare it's unidentified, it's flying, and it's 6 objects." Mm-hmm. We landed. I taxied, dropped him off, took off, went back to L.A. Never said a word. He never said a word. I never thought of it. 2 years later, Goldie is watching a television show when I came home. Yeah. And the show is on UFOs. But as I came home, "Hey, honey, how's it going?" And I'm kind of hearing the TV going, and I stopped and I started watching, and it was on that event. Now, that was the most viewed UFO event. Over 20,000 people saw that. And I'm watching this, and I'm feeling like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's like, why do I know this? What? And it's not clear to me. And finally, I said, then they said a pilot reported it. A general aviation pilot reported it on landing. I'd never thought of it since then, and I said, that was me. That was me. And I said, wait a minute, I'll go to my logbooks. So I went to my logbooks, and there was the flight at that time, and I didn't mention anything about the UFO. The fascinating part of that to me is that it just went literally out of my head. Yeah. And Oliver never mentioned it. And had I not seen that show, I'd have never thought of it again. Amazing. Now, that to me was the weird part.
There we go. Kurt Russell possibly was the first, civilian pilot to report this thing. What'd you think when you first heard about this, man?
Oh, it's pretty cool. And I love the response too, because that's kind of the response that a lot of people have with UFO sightings. You see something like I did. You see something, you kind of scratch your head, you're confounded by it. But later, when you hear about it, you're all, oh yeah, I did see that. Other people saw it too. Interesting. And I love how Goldie Hawn was just watching TV, watching a UFO show, and he saw, wait a second.
Randomly. I'm guessing it was probably like one of James Fox's documentaries or something, possibly. But yeah, and then the other weird thing he says at the end is that he didn't log the UFO when he put it in his journal there. And that he doesn't know why he didn't. Again, that kind of harkens back to this idea of whatever these things were, it made people almost forget it immediately. Now, again, we're not here to discuss the woo factor of all this, but it does have to be posed a theory that whatever these things were in Phoenix was able to mess with people. Or, again, like you always say, memory is faulty. We can't trust it when it comes to these things. And we truly don't know what's going on. So I thought that was a cool little tidbit to add in there, that Kurt Russell was a part of the Phoenix Lights incident, especially on a press junket for that movie.
That's the fun thing about historical cases. Over the years, we always get these little nuggets that add something new to it and keeps it alive and introduces it to new people and helps new people get involved in the investigation process.
Absolutely. And we've had a lot of celebrities come forward. Russell Crowe saw a UFO. What's that dude? Machine Gun Kelly. The list goes on and on and on. What's the guy who went out to Skinwalker Ranch as well? The rapper there.
Post Malone.
Post Malone. There we go. Yeah, man. Crazy. The way this topic has exploded into the mainstream like never before. All right, so we kind of run through the theories of what the Phoenix Lights were and weren't, and the timeline of events. So how does, in your opinion, Jason, living in Phoenix, how does the city embrace this event? In Roswell, they have a festival every year. Same with a lot of other small towns that have had famous UFO sightings. What is kind of the overall consensus in Phoenix of this event? Has it hurt the town? Has it helped? What are your thoughts on that as a resident?
There's not a whole lot here about the Phoenix Lights. It's a lot of people. Again, fifth largest city in the country. So we've got millions of people kind of doing their own thing. There is a electronic music festival, I think, called the Phoenix Lights Festival or something like that. But I don't think it's at all related. There's not any annual festival or anything official that happens here to celebrate it or anything like that. But when you talk to people here, good chance that the person you're talking to either saw the Phoenix Lights or knows somebody who did. Certainly with this topic opening up as an acceptable conversation to have with people, an acceptable topic to talk about, people are more and more willing to stand up and say, yeah, I saw that too. Pretty cool. But it's just kind of accepted here that it happened. It was cool. But we don't brag about it like Roswell does. I feel like that should be fixed.
Yeah, you guys are a bit more reserved. Well, we should mention, I believe it's the Heritage Center in Phoenix does have like a small exhibit that you can walk through and see the timeline of the events, the photos taken, the videos, which is really cool. I had the opportunity to walk through that with Dr. Lynn Katai, one of the original videographers of the Phoenix Lights.
And I will
she's
say
just a wealth of information. Yeah.
One of the coolest things that, related to the Phoenix Lights here is, credit to Lynn Katai, because she does every year host a screening of her documentary about the Phoenix Lights, and always has special guests come and speak before or after the showing. It's a pretty cool event, and she keeps that going, and new witnesses come forward, new information comes out, and she updates the film, she updates her website, so that's always interesting. And Fife Symington, I think, has been there, but he certainly was a guest at the International UFO Congress last year or the year before, I believe. But yeah, I mean, she keeps it alive, keeps it going, and I think will do more to have more of a presence here in Phoenix, not on the scale of a Roswell UFO festival, but little things like that with exhibits and things like that to help people understand the details of the case. Because as with most UFO cases, even monsters like Roswell, most people in the general public and even within the UFO community only know a little bit of the information, just few bits and pieces here and there. Because this is, you and I like to always say, Ryan, it's fascinating when we speak at conferences and Comic-Cons and things like that, how common it is for people to come up and talk about things like Roswell, but not even know where Roswell is, or they think Roswell is the same thing as Area 51, things like that. So a lot of the details, are lost on people, and that's understandable because people aren't diving in and researching UFOs. They're just casually interested in something strange that happened.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that you and I are a huge advocate of is getting the younger public interested in this topic, in the case history. So many people have, admittedly said, I just got into UFOs back when the New York Times article came out and the Navy videos came out. Like, I know I have a lot of catching up to do. And that's cool. But I think, again, it's important to get the younger people involved and interested and know what has come before these Navy UFO videos. And the Phoenix Lights is one of those. And what we do over at Mysteries Decoded, the television show on the CW, is introduce these cases to a younger generation that's never heard of Roswell, never heard of the Phoenix Lights. And you actually are going to be making an appearance on an upcoming episode of Mysteries Decoded. And we've got a little bit of a, I guess, backstage look at some of the stuff that's going to be going on. There's me with Lynn Katai. There's Jason, me, and Jennifer Marshall, my investigative partner at Mysteries Decoded. Tom King down there in the bottom, looking at his amazing cameras he has set up, trained on the skies of Phoenix constantly. Dude's got like a whole HQ there. We got to go visit him at his house. He also has a life-sized, not R2-D2, but one of the droids from Star Wars that he built from scratch, which was the coolest thing ever. Oh my God. We got some of Linkatai's photos there of the Phoenix Lights. And two gentlemen I just want to touch on here as well are at the bottom there, Clifford Mahooty, a Zuni tribe elder in Phoenix, who actually I got the immense pleasure of hiking up in the mountains in Phoenix to look at some petroglyphs of what is claimed to be the Star People and their possible connection to the Phoenix Lights incident as well. We did lose Clifford not too long ago, unfortunately. So again, it was such an honor to get to finally meet him and hike the mountains. And dude, this guy had like a kidney transplant, I think maybe 6 months before I hiked this mountain with him, and he beat me up there. So that tells you a lot right there.
Cliff was a badass.
He really was. He really was.
And
again,
a sweetheart. So is he going to be in the episode? Do you know for sure?
Yes. I have seen a rough cut of the episode.
So amazing. Yeah.
He made it in there. We do dive deep into the Native American aspect to the UFO phenomenon and its possible connection to the Phoenix Lights. I won't give away too much on that side of it, but I do think there might be something to be said about it. And then the last image I want to touch on in this upcoming episode of Mysteries Decoded is you only see the back of him, but up there we have a pilot who Jennifer and I had the pleasure of interviewing. I don't know. They might show his face. They might not. He did want to remain anonymous when we interviewed him. That might have changed once the episode airs. So you guys will have to check that out. But he was a pilot and did witness the Phoenix Lights that night. So we're going to get his side of the event, what he thinks it could have been, could have not been, and everything in between. So wanted to show that little image of him there to tease you guys. But yeah, the episode is going to premiere August 24th on the CW, guys. Check your local listings for that. We are going to revisit the Phoenix Lights like never before. And Jason will be featured in that episode as well. It was such a pleasure, buddy, meeting you up there. Which mountain was that we were on?
That was South Mountain.
Okay.
South Mountain. Yeah, it was fun being up there. You get a bird's eye view of the city. It was awesome.
So beautiful. And the reason that Jennifer and I were reinvestigating, I guess, the Phoenix Lights is because there were recent sightings of the same sort of phenomena happening in the area. I believe it was, just a couple years ago. But again, it could have been anything, but we thought it was worth reopening the investigation and connecting it to what these lights could have been recently in Phoenix. So yeah, definitely check that out, guys, if you can. That's kind of it, my man, in terms of the Phoenix lights, but we do have some listener questions here if you're willing to stick around for just a little bit for some of these. What do you think? What do you say?
You bet.
Awesome. Let's see here. This is an interesting one. Austin asks, Jason, have you since encountered any story of evidence that beat your own experience? What, I guess, any cases that really stick out to you that you've personally looked into that really stand the test of time?
Well, like I said, I mean, for me with in terms of the Phoenix lights, it didn't really impact me that much at the time, aside from lights in the sky that shouldn't really be there and, kind of confused me. I think many other witnesses to the Phoenix lights have far more exciting stories than I do. But in terms of other sightings I've had personally, I mean, I think many of the craft or objects I've seen, and I told you this on the show before, Ryan, but I've lost count of the UFOs I've seen. And when I say UFO, meaning things in the sky that I haven't ever been able to come up with a satisfactory explanation for. I say about a dozen UFOs, and several of those have been, strange shapes, low hanging in the sky, from rectangles to even like a hexagon. Just some weird things that, again, don't make sense in my mind. They don't belong where I saw them. So personal experience, and this is something you cover extensively, Ryan, personal experience, there's no substitute for. When it comes to UFOs, like your own experience really is the best evidence that you can have, because you can see all the photos and all the videos and hear all the incredible stories, but you weren't there. You don't know what this person saw, and you didn't experience what they experienced. I can look at a photo and say, yeah, that looks like this. That's most likely what it was. But I wasn't there. I didn't see it. They have their own experiences. So to equate, levels of evidentiary value or credibility or something that's more wow factor, man, being in UFOs so long, I've seen so many more things that are far surpass anything that I've experienced personally.
That's fair, man. Yep. And like you said, we weren't there when it happened, so we can't really have a final determination on what the Phoenix lights were, what these things you were seeing, what thousands of people all over the world are seeing on a daily basis.
And other people have video of the Phoenix lights. Where's my video footage?
Is of you playing baseball or something, probably, right?
It's probably my brothers were little and very much involved in sports all the time, soccer and baseball. So it's probably one of their games that recorded over it.
Damn.
But as I said, I mean, that's why I scanned that footage, hoping for like a cut, between stop and record, where I could have a flash of the Phoenix lights that I could get a still from. But that's lost forever, man. It's lost.
Alas.
I just got to let it go.
Just let it go. Crash Bob SquarePants. Some people said they received a message. This is only a demonstration. Did you get anything similar, Jason? Now, this is another theory we didn't touch on with Phoenix lights, is this idea that maybe this was some sort of stealth craft or balloon low altitude thing that they were testing, and they wanted to see how many people would report this thing
right,
and test it out. And once it got on the news and everything, everyone was saying they saw it. Do you think this could have been some sort of test that they were trying to see how the public would react to it, or how many people would actually see this stealth craft? Again, we're talking mid-90s. This was the height of the bombers and the stealth technology really coming to light for the public. At least it was probably being tested much earlier than that, as we always hear that thing. What do you think about this all being some sort of test on the public?
In this field, you learn to consider all possibilities, and that's certainly one of them. I can't rule that out. It might seem far-fetched, but the government and the military has conducted testing on the public before, and we could posit that same possibility with like the Tic Tac video and all that stuff. We're they actually testing their own their own pilots to see if they would release this information, how well they would follow protocol, what information would get leaked. We can speculate all day, but, with the Phoenix Lights, yeah, I mean, I heard that a lot from a lot of people who have talked about this. And I could even convince myself that, something was forcing me to go out and observe this thing, because I did have this impulse to continuously look at it and go out and check on it. So I don't think that's likely, just because that is a stretch. I think many other things are more likely possibility than that. But I certainly entertain it.
Well, hey, my man. Thank you so much for, sharing your personal sighting with us of the Phoenix Lights. I think it's so cool to meet someone that was actually there when this famous event happened, and you have your own side to it, your own thoughts, your own theories. So do hundreds of other witnesses who saw that. And I think it's cool that we got kind of the, the insider's view of it, if you will. But yeah, so guys, I want to thank everyone who tuned in today to listen to Jason and I talk all about the Phoenix Lights. I hope you enjoyed this kind of overview of the event. It was super fun, again, going through the history of it. And yeah, Jason, where can we find everything you're up to, my man, before we get going here?
Twitter's the best place. I post everything there. So @Acentric, right under my face there. And yeah, that's how you can find everything I do.
Stick around backstage. I'll chat with you in just a sec. And thank you so much again for joining me on Somewhere in the Skies.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you for joining us somewhere in the skies. Please take a moment to rate and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever possible. You can find us across all social media by searching for Somewhere in the Skies.